three pieces of work, all joint with Nobuhiro Kiyotaki from Princeton and Shenxin Zhang, now at Peking University. Today's talk, Key Workers and Funding Horizons, is a more microeconomics talk. When I was invited to give the Marshall Lectures, I was asked if I could to make it so that there's something for everybody. So today's talk is going to have some microeconomic theory, in fact some bargaining theory, and also, dare I say, some microeconometrics, although I'm wonderfully badly qualified to teach that. And then tomorrow, as I said earlier, I'm going to be looking at the macroeconomic implications of what I'm saying today. The empirical work that I'll report on at the end of today's lecture is joint work also with Gabor Pinter from the Bank of England. Now, I'm somewhat worried you can't see that, which is one of the reasons I asked you to step forward. Can you see the words? Okay. Good. So when firms or entrepreneurs raise funds for their projects, they raise them against the value of the firm. And I'm taking the value of the firm to be the sum of debt and equity. On the debt side of things, it would appear to be the case that potential creditors take a fairly short-term view of the return stream from the project that's being invested in. One way to get a handle on that is a critical ratio, which often is written in by way of a covenant in debt contracts, stipulating that the total amount of debt cannot rise above a multiple of what is called EBITDA, that is earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. And the multiple is typically some number between 3 and 4.5. Now we would like to deduce from that that creditors really look, let's say, 3 to 4.5 years into the future when they're assessing how much they're willing to lend to the entrepreneur. And given that investment projects are typically quite a lot longer than that, that to us strikes us as a form of short-termism, or at least that the creditors are taking a fairly short-term horizon, or have a fairly short-term horizon. On the equity side, and this is more controversial, and I understand there's a debate going on in the empirical literature. Naturally enough, I'd like to steal the side of the debate that suits my purpose. And so there's a paper here, a recent paper, Delano and Myers, which suggests that equity investors also focus on the next 5 years, even though the project may be quite a bit longer. So putting together those two things, I would like today to ask why. Why might external financiers' horizons be short, even though the investment itself may be long-term? Short, I mean, there's 3-year horizon. And then tomorrow I'd like to lift the microeconomic prediction of short-term horizons, funding horizons, and embed that within the macro model to see what the macroeconomic implications of it are. In particular, the macroeconomic implications of persistently low interest rates. So is it true that persistently low interest rates are a good thing for the economy? And I would like to argue that maybe, in fact, there is a dark side to persistently low interest rates. And that quantitative easing, which aims to reduce long-term interest rates, may have negative impacts on investment and growth. Now, the approach commented today and tomorrow is this, that key workers, and I'm focusing on key workers here, post-COVID or during COVID, we learned that key workers mean something very precise. They're key workers that keep the economy going in times of a pandemic. I don't want to think of key workers like that, if I may. So I'm thinking of key workers in terms of important workers to the project. They might be the chief scientist, the inventor, the chief chief executive officer, etc. So chief financial person. So key workers, human capital, is essential for the construction of a project, the startup of it, and also equally important, the maintenance of the productivity of the project. So key workers, our perspective is that key workers are persistently important to a project's success, not only to its initial investment, but also any subsequent maintenance, subsequent investment. But that this human capital that they possess is inalienably theirs, in the sense that they cannot contract or commit to supply that human capital into the project for the long haul, despite the fact that they might want to do so ex ante. So I'm going to use this contrast between what I call ex ante, which is the date of the investment. Today, I think, is Thursday, isn't it? So let's imagine that the initial investment takes place today, on Thursday, so let's call Thursday ex ante at the time of the investment. And then subsequent dates, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and so on, will be ex post dates. Now, at the time of the investment, these key workers, that is on Thursday, might wish to promise to potential funders, let's say you, so your deep pockets for the rest of the lectures, you take a rather sort of skeptical view about any promises I make, and I would like, other things being equal on Thursday, to promise to be a good boy down the road and not to muck about, and to promise to maintain the project, etc., into the future. However, there's a sharp distinction between what I promise on Thursday and what I deliver on Friday and Saturday and Sunday. And the thing is that my human capital is not something which I can sell to you. It's inalienably mine. And that's based on some work I did some time ago with. So here's the model. A discrete time model with an infinite horizon. Little t runs from 0 onwards. So today, Thursday is date 0, Friday, date 1, Saturday, date 2. At date 0, a construction of the project requires a group of key workers. So if you can bear the thought, imagine there are n of me, horrifying thought, all lined up here on Thursday, trying to persuade you, the deep pocket financiers, to invest in our collective enterprise. The project technology, the investment technology, this ex-ante technology, has got constant returns to scale. Per unit, in fixed proportion, two things go in: goods and amount per unit of X goods. Can you see like the red spot, or is it just ridiculously small? You can? Okay, so I'll use this red spot. So X goods go in conjunction with one building, but everything can be doubled up. Out by Thursday night come a plant, a unit of plant, with initial productivity Z1, which I take to be normalized to be 1. So on Friday morning, this plant has productivity 1. More of that in a minute. To simplify things, I want to assume a perfectly elastic supply of buildings into our sector, and let us suppose that the opportunity cost of building, or the rental price, ex-post rental price of buildings is F each period, and no depreciation of buildings, let's say, and let's say that the gross interest rate is capital R, greater than 1. So the net interest rate, which is the way we normally think about interest rates, would be R minus 1. Now, you're economists, therefore the cost of a building will be F divided by R minus 1. The ex-ante cost of a building will be the discounted value of the flow of little f's, which when you do the summation comes to F over R minus 1. Now the question which we, the little Johns, actually we talk about world. So there's a bunch of little Johns, N and us, and we, the little Johns, are trying to maximize the scale of our investment on Thursday. What do? We take our net worth after Thursday's consumption, so our net worth, I suppose we're all the same to each other, and we multiply that by n, so that's our personal contribution to the project, and then divide by the cost per unit of the project. Now the explicit or gross cost of the project per unit is X, of course, don't forget X up there, plus Q, which is the, did I say it was Q? Anyway, Q is F over R minus 1, the price, the unit price of a building. So given that those, it's a Leontief inputs, so the cost per unit of the project is X plus Q. So in the denominator here, we have X plus Q. Minus B. Now what is B? B is all important. It's the amount that you are willing to lend to us, ex ante, on Thursday per unit of the project. And since it's scalable, if we have 2 units, you're willing to lend us 2 times B, and so on. Question, how much are you willing to lend to us? And that's what I want to theorize about. But the crucial role, or the crucial driver of our economics is going to be the denominator. This X plus Q minus B. I think of that as the maximally levered unit cost, or the per unit down payments that each of us, or collectively the little Johns, need to supply in order to create an additional unit of investment. The focus here is on the denominator. Much of my work, I worked with Nibu here at Kentucky for many years, and a lot of our work has been focused on the numerator, net worth effects. Here it's all about, today and tomorrow, it's all going to be about the denominator. In fact, I wanted to call the title of this set of lectures the denominator in honor of Arnold Schwarzenegger, but Nibu wouldn't let me. So I'm going to focus a lot on this denominator. What is B? I want B to be as big as possible, because of course that would push up this crucial ratio, and the scale of investment will be correspondingly bigger. So there's an interesting kind of tension going on in my mind, or our minds, the little Johns, between the ex ante and the ex post. On the one hand, of course, other things being equal, I'd like to have all those ex post returns to myself, to ourselves. On the other hand, I'd like to pledge as much of that ex post return to you in order for you to be willing to put in a bigger B, ex ante, so that I can have a bigger investment scale. And in the race between those two wishes, it's the latter which wins. I want the scale of investment to be as big as possible, because let us suppose this investment has strictly positive returns relative to capital R. This is a great project, and I want it to be as big as possible. And to that end, I'm willing to commit as big a fraction of those ex post returns as I can incredibly do. Why? Because that will push up B and push up the scale of investment. Now, what can I sell to you? What can I promise to you ex ante? I can't sell you my human capital by assumption. That's inalienably mine. But what I can do is to sell you the project, the lot, the buildings, the equipment that I've installed and everything. And I just hand that over to you. So this is equity financing. You are the proud, by Thursday night, you are the proud owner of my factory. Now what about Friday onwards? Each date t greater than or equal to 1. Suppose we started off the morning with some level of productivity ZT, which is equal to a generic Z. Remember, Z is equal to 1 on Friday morning, but history may affect Z as we move into Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So each date, little t, has a whatever Z history is delivered by way of productivity ZT. And there's an natural upper bound to Z of 1. So it starts off at its highest level of productivity, let us say. I mean, all these things could be tweaked. Now these, let's talk about a generic date. It might be Saturday. So the first thing that happens on Saturday, given that, let's say, Saturday morning's productivity is Z, is that you, the proud owner of the plant, receive A times little z. So A is the multiple of Z, and you get that without any input from us, the little johns. So it's a very mechanical, almost engineering production. Where we kick in the n little johns is that you need our specific human skill, our human capital, to maintain the productivity through to the next day, Sunday. So let's say that Sunday's productivity is Z, little t here is Saturday, little zt plus 1 will be Sunday's productivity. Now what is zt plus 1 equal to as a function of Saturday's productivity, zt? And let's say zt is equal to some z. So I don't have to keep saying zt to you. The answer to that question is it depends on what we get up to, what shenanigans the end of a one might get up to. On the equilibrium path, we will all behave ourselves. That is, we'll, quote, work, unquote. And zt plus 1, Sunday productivity, is, look at the formula here, rho z plus 1 minus rho, which is an AR1 process gravitating z back up towards 1. If, for example, Saturday morning z was less than 1. And if Saturday morning z was equal to 1, then in that happy eventuality that all of us work, Sundays will also be equal to 1. But God is good to us through this first line here, in the sense that we get this freebie pushing productivity back up towards 1. If we all work. Now, on the other hand, if one of us shirks, and remember, our human capital is always ours, the little johns, and so we have the capability of shirking, and crucially, we cannot contract not to shirk. There's lots of negatives in that sentence. We cannot, on Thursday, ex ante, contract not to shirk on Sunday, or Saturday, sorry, I'm talking about Saturday. If that happens, if some of us shirk, then bad things happen to Sunday's productivity. In particular, if one of us shirks, remember there are n of us, if one of us shirks, then zt plus 1 is equal to z hat. I do apologize, I should have introduced z prime first. Z prime is rho z plus 1 minus rho, which is what happens if none of us shirk. And then if one of us shirks, then I'm afraid zt plus 1 will only be equal to z hat, which is a scaled down version of z prime, where this square bracket is less than 1. And how does it work? The lower theta is, the lower that square bracket is, I think you'll agree. So, for example, if theta was equal to 1, then that square bracket would be equal to 1, and you guys, the owners of the plant, would not be at our mercy. But as theta drops, it means that you are more, think of theta as a parameter for how much I've got you round, or we've got you by the collar. The lower theta is, the more vulnerable you are to us. And to be dramatic, if 2 or more of us shirk, then it's all over, forever. There's no way the project can pick itself up again. Now, the question is, what happens on Saturday? Now, we are sitting here, standing here. You desperately need our labour input. Contracts have not been agreed in determining wages, so this is now going to be subject to naked bargaining between the n plus 1 of us, you and as the plant owner, and the n of us, the little jobs. So I would like to get into the bargaining in a minute. Before I do that, could I possibly trouble you with some diagrams to say what I just said through the algebra? Because I think diagrams in a way are kind of helpful. Suppose on Saturday morning we started here in the 0-1 interval for productivity. So we were Saturday's productivity is, let's say, Z. If all of us work, then, as I said, we move up to Z prime, which is closer to 1. So that's on the equilibrium, hopefully on the equilibrium path, evolution of productivity. If one of us shirks, however, we drop down to Z hat. So if you can perhaps just remember the superscripts here, we've got Z prime, which is what happens on the equilibrium path, that's going back up towards 1, and we have Z hat, which is what happens if one of us shirks. The gap between these Z's, Z prime minus Z hat, is the marginal productivity of an individual little job. And there's the formula for it. Now you know that, and I know that, on something, when we're arguing. So presumably that gap is going to be relevant to the wage that you end up paying me. I'm sorry, I keep going back. Mathematically, there's a place called Z lower bound, which has the property that if one of us shirks, we stay there. So we never go below Z lower bound, which is bounded away from 0. On the other hand, if all of us work, even starting at that lower bound, then, as I say, God is good to us, and the productivity starts to up. And then finally, the last thing we can milk out of this diagram is the top. If we start at 1, there's no more goodness that God can deliver. And if we all work, we stay there, but on the other hand, if one of us shirks, we drop that down to Z hat. Now, I have to trouble you, please, to do some algebra together. I just want to warn you, this is going to take about 3 slides. It's not too hard, although it does have some kind of intricacy to it. So, remember the Thursday question about how big a scale of investment can I make, which depends on little b. And the bigger little b is, that's the more you're willing to lend to me on Thursday, the higher will be the scale of investment. And I've decided the best way to push b up is to sell the whole thing to you. I can't sell myself, we can't sell that. We little Johns can't sell ourselves to you, but we can sell all the physical stuff, which we do. Now, how much are you willing to pay on Thursday for being the privilege of being the plant owner? How much are you willing to pay to buy the plant per unit B? And the answer is the discounted value. Remember, 1 over R is the discounting, the overnight discount factor, is 1 over R times V of 1, which is the Friday morning value of a unit of plant, which kicks off with that initial productivity 1. Remember, the 1 is, it starts off at its level 1. So that's, on the face of it, a piece of cake. We just have to work out what is the discounted value to you of starting on Friday morning with the value of the unit of plant of productivity 1. Well, the first thing that comes in is you're going to get, well, let's talk about a generic Z, but in your head perhaps replace the Z here by 1 on the left-hand side. The first thing that you do automatically is receive A times Z, or it will be A, of course, on Friday, because Z is 1. And then at Friday lunchtime, or whatever date we're talking about, you could liquidate the building. You're the owner, you can do anything you like, that's what owners do. And you might say, I've had enough of this, and you're getting out, and you sell the building. And of course, the resale price of the building is cheap. No depreciation presupposed for the building. If you don't do that, then you roll up your sleeves, metaphorically speaking, and start to negotiate with us. This is now the Friday after lunch fight that's taken place. And we're symmetric, so whatever the wage W, which is, I presume, going to be a function of Z, that's not the morning productivity, it'll be multiplied by n across the n little drives. And then you will be the owner of a plant with productivity on the equilibrium path, where we hope the negotiation is successful and we none of us shirks. Then on the next morning, you'll have productivity z prime given by the algebra I just showed you, again discounted by whatever r. Now this is a Bellman equation. This holds. I can't see the red spot. Can you see the red spot anymore? Yeah, okay. So this is a Bellman equation, where the same function v is sitting in the left and the right-hand side. So in and of itself, that can be kind of subtle to solve. But it's sort of doubly complicated by the fact that w of z at this point in the analysis is unknown. We actually had some serious fun and games with this equation. It looks kind of simple. Your legal right to liquidate kind of perfumes the optimization program. And so interesting things can happen, particularly as Z gets closer to some lower levels, at which point you might want to start to liquidate. Now, on that front, could I just say now, right now, the Z lower bar, remember Z lower bar, that's the lowest level that Z can gravitate down to, which we hope is all off the equilibrium path. Z lower bar is not so low as to cause you to want to liquidate. So I'm interested in part of the parameter space where you're not tempted to liquidate. So your shutdown choice, although it's latently there, turns out not to be economically relevant in the part of the parameter space that I'm interested in. Okay, now, here's the bargaining. It's all very simple. Each of us, the N little Johns, has the right to make a take it or leave it offer to you. And you can say yes, no, as you wish. Of course, if you say no to two of us or more, then it's all over. You might as well sell that building. And in fact, you would sell the building. We have, in other words, on the face of it, a lot of bargaining power, because we're doing the talking. But we don't have that much bargaining power, because we're behaving non-cooperatively across each other. In a way, we're competing against each other in the bargaining process. So this is sort of a rudimentary form of n+1 bargaining that I'm possibly putting on the table. So what is the Nash equilibrium? We will end up, and sorry, given what I just said rather in parentheses, that we are away from the liquidation choice. So Z is higher than Z lower bar all the time, and Z lower bar is not so low as to make you interested in liquidating. And so we can get rid of the max Q bit of the Bellman equation at the top of this slide and replace it with something rather more down-to-earth looking, which is the same formula that we have the max Q. So that's the value function. Right now, we, the economists, don't have any idea what the function is, the functional form is. But whatever it is, in the Nash equilibrium, the wage that I will be able to extract from you is the gap, or the discounted gap, between V of Z prime and V of Z hat. Remember, Z prime is what the productivity tomorrow will be if all of us work. Z hat is tomorrow's productivity if one of us shirks, because it was me, and I've got you by the collar saying, I want my full marginal value. Because I want to be paid my marginal productivity. But my marginal productivity is evaluated through your value function. It's not the, as it were, engineering marginal productivity that's relevant here. It's the economic marginal productivity. So W is determined by this formula at the bottom of the equation, at the bottom of the page here. And so W and V are co-determined. You see that V is a function of W, W is a function of V. They're both functions of Z. So we're looking for a fixed point in sort of double function space. So although the model actually is pretty simple, I hope, it turns out to be kind of intriguing to analyze. And we've had difficulty, in fact we know, that there could be multiple solutions to this fixed point problem. But we've proved this proposition, which is that away from liquidation, and I'm assuming that, and I've said it a couple of times now, Z is high enough, Z lower, I should say, is high enough that you don't want to liquidate. And within the class of polynomial functions, V of Z is unique and is in fact really simple. It's affine. So it's got a slope. It's got a slope of, let's call it nu, as yet an unknown thing, and an intercept of C. So could you take my word for that proposition? I've constructed another solution to this simultaneous fixed point where there is an infinite number of either discontinuities or kinks. And I don't know quite what logic I'm appealing to here, but I'm going to assume that that is too esoteric for words, and that this really rather simple-looking affine function will do the job nicely. So I'm going to be focusing on this, if you don't mind. Okay, so armed with that proposition, we can start fiddling around, algebraically speaking. So W of Z is, as I said from the previous page, the gap between the Vz prime and Vz hat discounted. But we've got a functional form for V now, so that is in fact nu, the unknown slope of V, times the gap between the Zs discounted. And the gap between the Zs, we know that because from the particular functional form that I've put on the table. Therefore, V of Z, substituting for W from up here, V of Z into the formula for V of Z, this Bellman equation, we find this, I won't bother you with the details, and it ends up being an affine function of Z and Z prime. Now, we still at this point don't know what nu is. We do know everything else. I'm sorry, we not only don't know what nu is, we don't know what C is either, the intercept. But we know everything else, and in particular we know that Z prime is this AR1 process. And on the left we can replace V of Z by what the proposition tells us it's equal to. So putting all that together, we've got an identity at the top of this slide. An identity which involves, well, which is affine in Z. On the left-hand side, we've got an affine function of Z. On the right-hand side, we've got an affine function of Z. Now, the critical thing about this is it's called guess and verify, which you've, I'm sure, seen in macroeconomic analysis. This is the point we can finally pin down those unknown slope and intercepts, nu and C. What we do is we equate the constants on the left and the right, and we equate the coefficients of Z on the left and the right. Now, why do I do that? How can I do that? Because this is actually an identity that has to hold for all Z. If you think about it, there's no way this can hold for all Z unless the slopes are equal and the intercepts are equal. So we've got two equations and two unknowns, and that's exactly what the doctor ordered. We're in the business of trying to find out the value of C and nu. So doing that, and here it is, let me not bother you with the details, we can finally write down a formula for nu. Now nu, remember, is the slope of the V function, capital V function, which remember in English is your discounted value of ownership of a unit of plot. And the nu is, as it were, how much through the V do you get over time as a result of one more unit of productivity. That's what nu is. Now I would think, we did think, that would just be terribly boring. It would just be A plus A discounted plus A discounted. Remember, the productivity is A times Z. So if I say that Z's gone up by epsilon, so we're going to get A times epsilon, another A times epsilon, the next U, I should say. You're going to get A times epsilon, another A times epsilon, and it will be more guard. But it turns out that nu, the formula for nu, here, that we finally arrived at, isn't A plus A plus A, suitably discounted, of course. The whatever R is the whatever R squared is all perfectly to be expected. But look at the numerators. You've got theta rho squared, theta rho cubed. The return stream, which in equilibrium you get, is being shrunk daily by this fact of theta rho. Theta is less than 1, rho is less than 1. So it's like you've got double discounting. You've got standard discounting through R on the bottom line, but you've also got this shrinkage. It looks like shrinkage in A, but the A isn't shrinking. So what's going on? The answer is because every day these n little johns are biting into the cherry. So, for example, on Saturday, let's talk about Friday. On Friday, we come to you, and we're greedy. You're too greedy, of course, because you would. If I push my luck, you'll sack me. But if I push my luck to the point where you don't sack me, then I'm going to be able to effectively steal or take a fraction of my marginal product through the V function. Now, that marginal product is a forward-looking animal. You see, when I maintain or help maintain the project on Friday, I am not only keeping the thing afloat for Saturday morning, but I'm indirectly keeping it afloat for Sunday morning and Monday morning and Tuesday morning. So my marginal product is a forward-looking object. And I take that from you on Friday. It's as if I, on Friday, bite into not only the Saturday cherry, but on Friday I bite into the Sunday cherry too, and into the Monday cherry, and into etc. And then on Saturday, I bite into the Sunday cherry, and the Monday cherry, and the Tuesday cherry. So, which means the Sunday cherry has been bitten into twice, by me on Friday, and by me on Saturday. And so the fraction of the gross return A that you get on Sunday is smaller than the fraction of that you got on Saturday, which in turn is smaller than what you got on Friday. On Friday you get all of A because it's automatic. You buy the thing, it's brand new, it works. But on Sunday, by the time you reach Saturday, I will have a little bite on Friday. And by the time you reach on Sunday, I will have 2 bites, one on Friday, one on Saturday. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our theory of short-termism. The reason why you take a near-term view of the horizon when you're thinking of investing into this project on Thursday is because you know that I'm going to be repeatedly biting into the cherry, not just in the sort of day-by-day sense, but in the long-term sense. This is an example of what's called an Austrian technology, is a roundaboutness, which is my input, or our inputs, don't directly cause output. What they do is indirectly create output via the maintenance. So when you buy a plant on Thursday, although in equilibrium you will be getting A all the time, the reality is you're really buying a disappearing plant. It's like buying a Tesla. If you buy a Tesla, I never bought a Tesla, but if you bought a Tesla, for goodness knows how much, is it 80,000 pounds or something, you might think, great, I'm now finally dealing with a Tesla, it's all mine. But then you realise you've got to go back to Tesla every year to get the latest software updates and so forth. And every time you do that, the garage takes a bite of the cherry, and it's not just the next day's cherry, it's all the future. So actually, in 10 years' time, that Tesla effectively belongs to Tesla, not to you. I know when you get to 10 years' time, it will still be yours, but en route, you've been paying the garage all the while. So when you look at actually the 10-year return, most of it actually belongs to Tesla. I don't know whether that helped or not, but maybe. So along the equilibrium path, Z stays at 1. And let's say W of 1 is just W. The wage bill, and now we're just cranking out from, this is the beauty of having done what we did, cranking out using those this method on determining coefficients, we now know what W is. The wage bill is a discounted sum of future returns. So the algebra here, I'd like you to like it. The algebra here is because when I'm negotiating a wage at any moment, I'm actually taking a bite of all future cherries. So my wage, when we look at the algebra, is a forward-looking object. It's the discounted sum of some future stuff. Okay. Now, when you look at the crucial thing, B, which is 1 over R times VA1, on the face of it, it's terribly dull. But every day, same old, you get the return of A per unit, you pay a wage bill of NW, and that's true on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And it's all discounted back by R to Thursday, and that's what little b is. So very simple looking formula for B. But when you substitute W from upstairs here, and bear in mind that W is a forward-looking animal, then the first NW here, the red one, appears in the summation starting from Saturday, but still in there on Sunday, still in there on Monday. This is my idea of the Friday bite of the cherry is not just Saturday's cherry, but also Sunday's cherry. I think I've laboured that point enough. Now, this final way of writing B shows us this. It's algebra, and I don't want you to look at it and understand it necessarily, but it shows us what we've just discussed intuitively, which is that your take-home share of the project drops through time. So now this diagram captures that idea. So we've got time on the horizontal axis. Let's suppose we start at date 0 Thursday. Up here at the top we've got A, which is flat. On the left axis you see A minus NW. So that flat black line is every day the same. That's your cash flow. Your cash flow, A, revenue, minus wage bill, there are no other inputs. A minus NW is what you get every day. So your return on the face of it is absolutely flat. But another way to think about it is taking each vertical slice of height A, what fraction of it is mine through the bargaining, or ours, little ones, through the bargaining, and what fraction of it is left over for you. And your residual share is dropping through time. So that's my theory of short-termism. Just to get it straight, the area, or the discounted area under the green line, is equal to the discounted area under that A minus NW line. It's just the green line we find a more revealing way of thinking about your life. And the reason I'm so interested in your life is because that determines little p, which determines the scale of your investment. Now, looking at this, there's one very intriguing thought. I'd love you to have this thought, which is F. F is the opportunity cost of the building. Now, F is less than A minus NW, so this is a nicely productive plant that we're talking about. There's no question of shutting it down. But the green line crosses F. And at that point, you might think, why don't I sell my Tesla? Why don't I shut down the factory since the opportunity cost is greater than what's left of the cake? A cherry. I'm mixing my metaphors badly. But what's left of the cherry for you, which is a bit below the green line, has fallen below the outside opportunity flow cost, F. And so surely, to goodness, the right thing to do would be for you to shut the project down. We thought that for a while, and then we realized the following, that when you move time forward, so to time tau, which I don't know, might be next Tuesday, life looks exactly the same as it did on Friday for you. It's just that between Friday, tomorrow, and next Tuesday, you have had to pay me wages, which are the shaded area in this diagram. But they're sunk costs as far as you're concerned on Tuesday, next Tuesday. So next Tuesday, you are the owner of this Tesla, this brand new looking car, And it's true that you have to pay the garage, that's me, a lot of stuff in the meantime, but that's a sunk cost. And looking from Tower onwards, next Tuesday onwards, there's no doubt in your mind that you should continue. So yes, the green line crosses F, but it doesn't mean you should shut the project down. Now the scale of investment, I'm just rehearsing the formula we had some time ago now. So the scale of the investment up there on the left is n times our net worth after consumption divided by the famous denominator x plus q minus b. Now this is relevant for tomorrow particularly, but it's, I hope, intriguing now, which is that B, for all the reasons that I've just described to you, has an inherently short-term horizon to it. Q, though, is just F over R minus 1. It's got no short-term as a building. The price of a building is what it is. So B is less exposed to long-run interest rates than Q is. Q is a FFF present value. B is the present value of that green line, which is dropping. And so if I ask you, well, what would be the impact of a rise in the, sorry, not a fall, let's say, a fall in long-term interest rates, thanks to, let's say, quantitative easing, Q would go up a lot. B would also go up, of course, you know. Low interest rates, good news, I can borrow more. But in the race between the two, Q may go up more than B, because Q has got a tail to it, which B doesn't, if I can put it in that rather sort of childish way. Long-run interest rates impact Q more than they impact B. So it can be the case that low interest rates hurt me. Now, I'm a borrower on Thursday, and we all taught from Econ 101 onwards that low interest rates are good news for borrowers. But here it turns out that low interest rates are bad news for borrowers because the cost of one of their critical inputs, the building, has gone up more than the borrowing capacity of the project that they're trying to fund. And an example of this, dare I say it to you, is young people entering the housing market. Would you prefer to live in a world of low interest rates? This is very topical, of course. Would you prefer to live in a world of permanently low interest rates or permanently high interest rates when you're first entering the housing market? And the answer might be you prefer high interest rates because, of course, with high interest rates you can't borrow as much. Building societies and banks are tougher. But house prices are lower. And in the race between house prices and mortgages, it may be that the house prices are the dominant effect, which is what's happening here, or can happen here, because of the fact that the FFF, which is dictating Q, the price of the building, is not decaying through time, whereas the B, the green line that I'm focusing on, is. And that could be strong enough that in the macroeconomic framework it actually suppresses investment, consumption and growth, and can be permanently bad news for the economy. In fact, it can be a Pareto deterioration to have lower interest rates. So that's what I'm going to be talking about tomorrow. To get into that, though, I'll need to construct a different looking model that's more amenable to macroeconomic analysis. What's going on is that the gap between the project and the opportunity cost of the building, which is the grey area, because of the crossing property, the fact that the green line crosses the horizontal F, means that the contribution, that's the net present value of these areas viewed from day board, the contribution of the red area is negative to B, which is why when the interest rate goes up, particularly the long run interest rate goes up, that can cause the B to drop. Normally, when you talk about an increase in long-run interest rates and you're working up present values, that causes things to go up. But because of that negative red area, the long-run interest rate can have a bad effect on present values, in this case, a bad effect on B. You might ask, why do we need all this funky Austrian technology, right? And why our inputs are affecting your life through maintenance rather than explicit production? That's what we think of as the roundabout Austrian technology. The answer is, if we went for a sort of standard depreciation technology, then the usual logic would kick in. You would liquidate when the green line, so to speak, the equivalent of the green line, intersects F. There would be no red area, and the interesting stuff that I've just told you, I hope is interesting, wouldn't happen. Now, so if I may finish off with some empirical evidence. The first thing, very briefly, is Urimaer, a professor in Chicago, has been working in this general area a lot, and is probably one of the world's experts now on funding. And really, the data analysis is very hard because it's so messy. But she understands the mess. We asked her, rather cheekily, to tell us, how does this beta ratio, remember I mentioned this 3 to 4.5 ratio, how does that change? How might it change as you move across types of firm? So she said, well, let's look at knowledge capital share. So you could take firms and ask how much of the capital value is to do with accumulated R&D, for example, that kind of soft investment, as opposed to something tangible. So firms differ in their ratios. And I would like to suggest to you that firms have got a lot of, what's called knowledge capital share, it's a high proportion of accumulated R&D, are firms with lots of key workers. Now, in my language, that means theta is low. Okay? So theta low puts a lot of power in the hands of the little Johns in my story, and makes the speed with which the green line fall faster. So okay. In fact, I'd like to think of those as funky firms. When I introduce a technical word here, funky. So a funky firm is a firm that's whose capital share is particularly dominated by this soft knowledge. So funky algebraically means low theta. And the prediction of our model would be that obviously the steeper that green line drops, the more short-term is your horizon when you're contemplating investing on Thursday. And presumably, therefore, the lower the ratio of EBITDA that you're willing to lend to me. And that turns out to be the case when you look at these spots. And then she kindly looked at it another way for us, a more general definition of this nebulous thing that I'm trying to get my fingers on here. And here she looked at design cost share, which is a broader category. And yet again, the ratio, I'm not being quite clear enough. The willingness of creditors to lend to firms with low thetas is tighter. Such firms face harder borrowing constraints. And our theory of that is quite simply, well, those firms are more vulnerable to their key workers. And little surprise then that banks and creditors take a dimmer view of the medium to long run future. Now the next and final part of my lecture is going to be some empirical work with Gabor Pinter. The three of us have joined forces with Gabor Pinter from the Bank of England. Now the Bank of England have access, I think actually this is public access information via Companies House. It's about the UK, and in the UK, companies, all firms, no matter how small, have to lodge their accounts at Companies House. So there are about 6 million firms, from very tiny, mom and pop firms, with just the two people running it, through to enormous firms, private and listed firms are also, of course, included. Now, some of the information that firms have to provide is to do with directors and numbers of employees. Their firms actually are very good at saying how many directors they have, because I think it's a legal obligation. They're rather less good at saying how many employees they have. So there's some wastage, I have to say. So the 6 million drops rather fast when we demand extra information. So my apologies for that, but it's just, I'm afraid, a fact of the data. So what I would like to put to you right now is the idea that funkiness could be a proxy for funkiness is the ratio of the number of directors to the number of employees. So this is very rough, I have to say. In fact, it's so rough that I'm kind of amazed that we're going to get anywhere. But, right, so can I just say to you that a low theta firm, I'm sorry about the directions of travel here, but low theta is high funky. And high funky is a high ratio of the number of directors divided by the number of employees. And the logic, my thinking here, is that directors equal key workers. And now some of them, of course, are owners and shareholders, but others will be experts. And therefore they sort of fit into my little John category. What I would like to do is to see whether the funkier the firm, and to repeat that means the higher the ratio of directors to employees, the funkier the firm, the less responsive they are to, let's say, falls in interest rates, particularly long-run interest rates. So my theory, remember the green line, it suggests that a funky firm will have a particularly steeply sloping green line, and so what would on the face of it look like a beneficial fall in long-term interest rates doesn't have much impact on B, but has still, of course, a big impact on Q. So that's my hypothesis. Now we need to sort of disentangle cause and effect here, so in order to get some what I hope is genuinely exogenous movements in interest rates, we turn to almost the opposite extreme. We look at a 30-minute window around a monetary policy committee announcement of interest rates. And we say that any movement in the short-term rate, and I notice people are leaving, I do apologize for being dull. I think I'll be finished in about 15 minutes, if that's okay. Is that okay? Anyway, so go back to my window. So they measure, real-time data here, interest rate movements around the time of a monetary policy committee announcement. So let's look at the 30-minute window. Now the short-term rate, by which I mean the 3-month rate, moves, as does the long-run rate, of which there are many varieties, but let's say the 5-year rate. So what we do is to extract the shock, and we think of this as an exogenous shock in short versus long-term interest rates. Now what we're really after is the slope or shape of the yield curve. Each horizon of debt, government debt has a different interest rate on it. Everything's annualized, by the way, so we're not falling into the trap. So we're talking about equivalent annual interest rates on these different maturities. That's called the yield curve. What we would like to do is get our hands on the yield curve. We don't have that much data, so we do something which is done in the macro literature, finance literature, which is to look at the intercept and the slope of the yield curve. Now the intercept will measure or proxy with the short-term rate, and the slope we will proxy by the difference between the 5-year, the long-term rate, and the short-term. I'll just say that again. The intercept of the yield curve under the proxy to the short-term rate, and the slope of the yield curve will be the gap between the long and the 5-year and the short-term 3-month rate. Now that monetary policy committee meetings happen every, whatever it is it 6 weeks or 3 or 4 weeks, however often they meet. Firms have to hand in their accounts annually, but they're not, into Companies House, but they're not sort of synchronized. So different firms hand in on different months of the year. So for each firm, suppose you put in your accounts, actually you're a deep pocket. Suppose I put in my accounts in July. So what we, the economists, do is to look back at the previous 12 months worth of interest rate shocks and add them up. So, and take that to be, respectively, a shock to the intercept and the slope of the yield curve. And in case we get lost, let me just say, our prediction is, our hope is, that funky firms respond less to the slope of the yield curve because they are less exposed to the distant future, not because they want to be, but because the creditors, potential creditors, are taking a dim view of the medium to long run. The green curve is forming very fast. So the hope would be that this rather weird little measure of funkiness, the number of directors divided by the number of employees, predicts the responsiveness of investment on the asset side, and we also do it for debt on the liability side. Okay, so this, I have to say, I'm not an empirical economist, so I'm feels embarrassed talking about these matters, but this seems rather heroic to me. I thought this would never work. So this is the regression that we run. On the left-hand side, we've got the growth rate over some horizon, which we take to be either 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years. That's what the H is in this formula here. You don't look at the percentage growth rate because you'd be finding yourself divided by 0 too often. So we use what's called the Halsey-Wagner et al. Measure of growth rate on the left-hand side. Fixed assets. And on the right-hand side, we have, on the top line of the right-hand side, the delta RSR, which is a shock to the short rate, or at least even the previous 12 months worth of shocks to short rates added up, times a dummy called DNF for firm I is equal to 1 if it's a non-funky firm, and another dummy DFI, which is equal to 1 if and only if it's a funky firm. So it's either 0 or 1. And the slopes beta will, respectively, beta NF and beta F, will be the responsiveness of those two classes of firm, funky, non-funky, to short run rates. The second line is the exact same, but let's call them gamma now, the slopes. They are the responsivenesses to the slope of the yield curve, respectively for funky and non-funky firms. The third line is some intercepts. So the first two lines are what we're really interested in. In fact, it's the middle line, the second line, that I'm really interested in, because that's where I'm hoping to spot a difference between funky and non-funky. So I'm hoping that the coefficients gamma here will be different from each other. And more precisely, I'm hoping that gamma NF will be sizable, whereas gamma F will be less sizable, because I have this theory in my head saying that funky firms don't respond much to changes to the longer part of the yield curve. All right, so that's the deal. Now, this funkiness measure is awkward. It could be awkward. Here's a typical. What we did is to take all 6 million firms, or however many firms we could get our hands on the data, and put them into size bins by number of employees. So the smallest size firms, look at the size 1 here, have got 2 directors. The median number of directors for the smallest size firm is 2. So that's not surprising. That's, mom and pop. The number of employees is 1, so that's the janitor. funkiness, which is the ratio of the first column to the second column, is 2. These are medians. Total assets about £23,000, fixed assets about £2,000. All this through to enormous firms where the median number of directors is 3.86. Median, how could a median not be a whole number, you think? Well, that's because a firm that is nice to us and gives us several batches of data. The data is between 97 and 2020. So if a firm reports well, we use all of its reports in little chunks, 3-month windows. And its number of directors might vary during that 22 years. That's why you can get a strange number of directors. And its number of employees is 243. Of course, its funkiness ratio is tiny. So, unless we do something a bit more sensible, we're going to call all the small firms funky and all the big firms non-funky, which would be a stupid thing to do. So what we do is we take each size bin and look for each firm in the bin at its funkiness ratio. Is everyone with me what a funkiness ratio is? That's the number of directors by the number of employees. And the ones that are above the median for that size bin we'll call funky, and the ones that are below the median for that size bin we'll call non-funky. This is pretty crude. And we've worked it out changing from 50% to other splits, so it doesn't change the results much. I should explain this UK data is really quite different from US data CompuStat. So CompuStat is on listed US firms. And the smallest listed, I think the median CompuStat firm, so to speak, is like $150 million of assets. I may be misstating that terribly. Whereas the median of our, here's like, I didn't talk about assets, did I? The median asset size for our size 10 bin is £12 million. So even the smallest CompuStat firms would be decidedly inside our 10th bin. So we're really looking at, I hope, a more interesting cross-section of firms. So we're really focusing on small and medium and large firms. Because we've got an agnostic on whether our theory applies to small, medium, or large firms. All right, so let me, in the interest of saving time, jump to this regression. So the columns here refer to 1 year out, 2 years out, and 3 years out. Now, investment, we know, takes time to respond. It takes time to get yourself organized, think about what you're going to do, and do it. So, whatever that duration is, we thought 3 years would capture it. So perhaps the most interesting column here is the right-hand one, the 3 year out column. So these will be the betas and gammas that I showed you earlier. And the first 2 rows of the final right-hand column are the response of, respectively, the first row is for non-funky, and the second row is for funky. And the response of growth, remember what's on the left-hand side of the regression, it's the growth rate in fixed assets over that 3-year horizon. These are big numbers, actually. So that's the growth rate, the change in the growth rate in response to a 100 basis point fall. So we're always talking about falls in interest rates here, in order to keep these numbers positive. What's the impact of 100 basis 1% fall in short-term rates on 3-year growth in investment? Did I say that right? I think so. And the answer is 24, 25. That's a big number. I should explain that the reason why it's a big number is because we're taking each firm on its own. We're not doing value weighting analysis here. So small firms contribute just, one mom and pop firms contribute just as much as IBM or something. So IBM is one data. Well, actually, that's not true because IBM is probably rather good at sending its accounts, and so we're getting lots of windows at IBM. But still, it's a small number of IBM entries, whereas mom and pop might be much worse at sending in their accounts, and so we might get much more patchy data for them, but there are just so many more of them, and we're doing it by number of firm observation. So these numbers are large, but we already knew that the responsiveness of small firms to interest rate cuts is very large, which is why these numbers are big. But what's interesting to us, to me, is that these numbers are roughly the same as each other. So the responsiveness of funky versus non-funky to short-run interest rate cuts is the same. It's rather like saying, well, this thing funkiness that you've invented is not doing much work. But, and here's the whole point of this last part of my talk, the responsiveness of the non-funky firms to changes in longer-run interest rates is significant, whereas the responsiveness of the funky firms to long-run interest rates is quite a lot smaller and insignificant. And when you do some testing, the gap is significant. I'm interested in the gap between, let's get it straight here, I'm interested in the gap between 22.59 and 14.68. The fact that that is a fairly big gap and a statistically significant gap. So these are just the absolute levels of these things. It's the non-funky firms, and we've got a couple of asterisks there in terms of 5% statistical significance. What's in brackets, by the way, are the T statistics. The fact that the non-funky firms are significantly affected by long-term interest rates, whereas the funky firms are not, is I'm putting to you evidence in favor of our green line theory. So that funky firms, the green line falls faster, they're not as exposed to long-run interest rates through the eyes of the people who are lending the money, you. And so therefore, when we isolate out an unexpected shock, exogenous shock to the slope of the yield curve, I'm hoping, econometrically speaking, I haven't done something stupid, it turns out that that has this interesting differential effect. So I'm putting forward that as my theory, our backup empirics for our theory. If we were doing it size bin by size bin, we could do everything I've just done, but go within each bin. It turns out that actually the bins that are doing the heavy lifting are the middle bins. What I mean by that is, it's not an artifact of something to do with the small firms, or equally worrying, something to do with the big firms. It's the middle firms where the gap between the coefficients is at its most significant. And when you put them together to create the single table that we were just looking at, it's those middle-sized firms which are causing 22.59 to be bigger than 14.68, if I can put it in those terms. It's like this regression is done with firm fixed effects. So there's 82,000 firms here, and each of them has got their own idiosyncratic fixed effect. So firms, of course, vary hugely. Are they shrinking? Are they growing? How old they are, etc. All of that is, we hope, captured in the firm fixed effect. And we've also, the sort of classification of funky versus non-funky, we've gone about it in other ways as well. Instead of doing it in simply 10 size bins, we've done a sort of 3-level split. So we talk about firms by size, yes, of course, by age, and by industry. So you can really sort of, with all this data, you can really go to town and start creating much smaller bins and run the regression within each of the bins, and we still find this crucial, well, crucial is my word, not yours, but we find this interesting, and what I find an interesting differential between the slope on the funky versus the non-funky. And remember, please, my split between funky and non-funky is nothing more sophisticated than asking, is the ratio of the number of directors to the number of employees higher or lower than the median of the bin in question? Finally, very nearly at the end, we looked at the other side of the balance sheet, that is to say the liability side, and asked, well, what about growth rate in debt? Does that respond in a similar sort of way? And particularly the differential between funky and funky, and it does. So it's not, yeah, so both the asset and the liability side, let me be clear. Non-funky firms respond to long-run interest rates, or let's be more accurate, the slope of the turn of the yield curve. Non-funky firms respond to the change in the slope of the yield curve more whether you look at investment in fixed assets or whether you look at their debt. And that squares off with my theory, which is that the green curve slopes more steeply for funky firms. One other, this is the last thing I say, I promise, one other way to get at it we thought of as the funkiness ratio would be to look at dollars or pounds. So instead of talking about a headcount ratio, a number of directors to number of employees, we looked at the remuneration of the directors divided by the wage bill. Okay. And then actually for the record, we do our bin sizing using dollars as well. So we take all the firms in the 6 million. I should explain to you, we slice out a lot of firms that we're not so interested in, like charities, financial firms, real estate. Okay, so that prunes the 6 million down quite a bit. Or dead firms, we're not interested in dead firms. That gets rid of a lot of the 6 million because they died between, they went bankrupt between 1997 and 2020. Okay. So we classify it into size bins using the size of their dollar or the pound amount, the monetary value of their total assets. And then within each size bin, we then look at the ratio of the remuneration of the directors divided by the wage bill of the non-directors. And then we look at the median of that ratio within the bin, and then we classify and say, okay, if that ratio is above that median, you're called funky, and if you're below median, you're called non-funky. Okay, so that was another way of trying to get at, an alternative way of getting at funkiness, and with the firm fixed effects put in there, we do get a differential between 21.75 and 17.31. In the interest of openness, it's less impressive, but notice that the top numbers, 26.82 and 25.66, are a lot closer. So the responsiveness, the classification into funky versus non-funky would appear to be less important when it comes to short-term rates than long-term rates. And that, by the way, is a sort of backdoor way of suggesting that although you might, we thought that there may be lots of other things going on when you're talking about a firm with lots of directors or lots of well-paid directors. Perhaps those people have got great contracts or something in the banking sector. Lots of stories one can bring to bear, thinking why the funky may be different from the non-funky, which are quite distinct from my green line theory. Well, is that true that we would presumably expect 26.82 not to be close to 25.66? So it's the fact that the differential appears against the long run or the slope of the yield curve, but doesn't seem to be sitting there on the intercept, which I'm putting forward as my evidence in favor of today's theory. So just before I close, can I say tomorrow, I think I've said this, but I said advertise it, tomorrow I really want to change the mood. I won't be doing micro theory, I won't be doing bargaining theory, and I certainly won't be doing any more econometrics. I'll be going straight into macro.